Hey, this is Patrick Curtis, CEO and founder of Wall Street Oasis. Today's chat is with Trent. I love this story. Trent is super authentic, super down to earth. He joined Academy after he had already graduated with a master's in finance from a non-target University of San Diego. He had taken his CFA level one, but he was really just striking out in terms of in terms of trying to get a role, a markets oriented role, sales and trading, equity research, whatnot. Listen to what the Academy did for him, but more importantly, listen to the piece of advice he gives on his coffee chats and really what he thinks made a big difference in terms of being able to eventually land a great role. Enjoy. All right, Trent, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Really excited to hear your story and kind of how you made it to where you did. First off, it'd be great if you could just give the listeners a short summary bio.
Yeah, so short summary bio is actually first off, I started college in junior college. Basketball player, played basketball, and then my freshman year was actually when the pandemic first hit. So once that happened, basketball season was over, and it was just pretty chaotic. So I got into University of San Diego, just did 1 year at JUCO, transferred there, started off online school, and transferred from JUCO. It was kind of like a weirdish time because I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing in terms of internships, and I was actually just declaring my finance major. I didn't because JUCO is very broad. You just take your general courses, but then going into San Diego, I was like, I want to do finance. So did that, and then got my undergraduate degree. And throughout my undergraduate degree, I was kind of just going to school. I worked some part-time jobs in the summers, but not any crazy internships or any experience to really set me up. And then upon undergraduate graduation, I was, my senior year applying for jobs, going about it my way. Um, Nothing was really working, but I did get an internship at Robertson Stevens, did that over
Nice.
the summer going into my grad school, and then completed grad school, same thing, trying to go about applications my own way, still just was not working, wildly unsuccessful. And that is how I, came to Wall Street Oasis, just scrolling through LinkedIn and stuff. I found out about this program and, saw the outline and I was like, this is exactly what I need, did it. And it ended up working out for me. So
It's awesome. It's awesome. So yeah, let's go all the way back to JUCO. So why go to JUCO? Why not go to the 4 year? Were you a late bloomer in high school? Kind of take it a while to figure out what you wanted, or was it more, hey, you need to get your feet under you financially, stuff like that?
yeah, so it's kind of a late bloomer in high school. I was a big basketball player in high school. And when I thought about college, I was like, I want to play basketball. So I went the JUCO route, just to try to continue playing basketball.
Cool.
And in high school, I wasn't,
What
a
position?
crazy
What
student. I
position?
didn't, yeah. I wasn't,
No, what position? What
crazy
position did
student.
you? What position did you play in
Oh,
basketball?
position. I played point guard slash shooting guard. So
Nice.
you could call it a combo guard.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm about 6 foot, so not super tall in basketball terms.
Yeah.
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 Um, but yeah, no, I would say that just throughout high school, pretty average student. But then once junior college hit, I kind of just took it as I'm going to take academics super seriously. Just something hit me, and that's when I just started really trying in school. So academically, I was there, got good grades, but in terms of just knowing the ins and outs of how I should be networking or applying for jobs, I had absolutely no clue and not very much guidance. So
Did you know finance was something that interested you by freshman year after you transferred, or was it more did it take till sophomore or junior year? You have to declare a finance major when sophomore year?
I declared it going into my sophomore year. So when I first
Okay.
transferred, and
Yep.
I'd say freshman year is when I
What made
knew
you say, "Hey, I'm going to do finance"? What made you think it's just hey, good, it could pay pretty well, or were you interested in the markets? What brought you there?
I got interested in capital markets. So it started with I just came in and I knew I was going to do something business related, kind of the standard, I'm going to do business admin or just something along those lines. And then I can kind of narrowed it down to I want to do economics or finance. And then just after just going in and just saying, what is a stock? What is market cap? What is earnings per share? Just basic stuff like that. I was like, I'm pretty interested in this. And then
Yeah.
that kind of just led me to go deep into the finance rabbit hole and
And
just start.
so, and so once you started kind of going down that rabbit hole sophomore year, did you know like the traditional like banking, recruiting timelines, equity? I mean, because you came into us and we are like, hey, I'm really interested in equity research, more kind of the trading side, more like the market side. Did you know about all these other front office roles and stuff like that when you kind of were in college? I assume no, or a little bit maybe. Well,
No, so it's actually funny because my first, I'd say, hands-on experience in financial markets is I joined this program called Predicting Alpha.
oh,
And
cool.
it's a options volatility trading academy based out of Canada. You can look it up online. It's super cool. But that was my first exposure to finance. So it was weird because I got in this kind of niche volatility trading group where I was talking with these guys where it's pretty much saying you don't really need to know much about the company. It's pretty much just numbers like implied volatility versus realized volatility. And you can make money
Hmm.
by capturing the spread between the two in a nutshell. But that was my first exposure to finance. So I went in thinking, oh, I'm going to do something related to that. But
Yeah.
then when I started looking at jobs for that, it was a lot of math majors, computer science majors, and
Yeah.
just academically, I didn't have a math or computer science major. I was just a finance major. So why equity research just kind of came into my interest is because people with finance backgrounds do go into equity research, and it was just the next, I guess, closest thing to capital markets. So that's why I was into sales and trading roles or equity research roles. And then I also found myself doing well in the financial statement analysis classes. So I figured, oh, that could tailor me into something like equity research, where you're working a lot with financial statements.
For sure. So you kind of started realizing this, what, like junior year or so, after that internship, and like, were you applying to jobs? Were you, tell me about like the internships? Because I saw you did have that Robertson Stevens internship, right? Wealth management internship, right? In between.
Yes, and that was late. It was weird because with internships, my situation was weird because transferring from junior college, there's a lot of courses that don't get transferred over, and it's a whole thing with admissions. Like, does this credit?
Right. So you got to
Can
do
I come
more,
this
you got to do
way?
more classes.
Yeah. So in order to, because I didn't want to, in order to get done in just 4 years of college and undergrad in total, I had to do summer courses.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
that kind of cut into some of the internship deadlines, or I wouldn't be available for the first couple of weeks, and I can't say like, oh, can I come into the internship program a little bit late. So in terms of applications for that, it was weird for summer internships. Yeah,
Yeah.
that
And so
was.
you're kind of, so tell me about like your junior, let's say your junior year. At that point, did you start considering, hey, maybe I want to put a master's at the end? And the reason I asked you this, I was teasing you a little bit before we hit record about,
Mhm.
I would never recommend somebody going to a bachelor's and then stacking a master's from the same university right behind it,
Mhm.
simply because I see that as like a lost option value and a lost
Mhm.
opportunity to hit a whole different alumni base. Even if it's a non-target, whatever, even a different alumni base is helpful because it's easier to get people on the phone down the road. But
Mhm.
you had come to us after that, right? You had already come to us post masters. Tell me about the thought process of like, hey, you know what? I'm going to stack the masters in finance after undergrad because obviously there is value to it. I just like to see it later. But tell me about what
Mhm.
your thought process was, and I'd love to hear, like, in your case, if it made more sense.
Yeah, so I'd say I think the realization that I was going to do my master's happened my senior year.
Mhm.
Like I said, I was doing some summer classes and trying to finish my academics. And for some reason, looking back, it's not the smartest thing, but I had this notion that, oh, like once I officially get the degree, like, job offers are going to be not pouring in, but just going to land something. Like it's going to be
Yeah,
fine.
yeah,
But then senior year, just after getting deny email, no response, I was like, oh, it's just not how it works. So
yeah,
the next thing was, all right, maybe I have to continue schooling just because I have no offers. And then just because I went to University of San Diego undergrad for the MSF program, I was able to skip the GMAT and all that because, just a smooth transition from the undergrad to grad school.
yep,
And that was mainly the reason I was like, have no offers. I knew eventually I wanted to do some sort of further education. So I was like, you know what, now is I guess the time to get a master's program
And
done.
I don't hate that rationale. I just would say that like a lot of people will use master's programs when there's a recession,
Hmm.
when there's like, and so I like having that in the pocket, like when you potentially need it later in the career. So like that's the only thing I'd say is like for people listening to this, if you had to go back, if you had talked to me like sophomore year, well, we would have you geared up and ready to go before you graduated undergrad. But my point is like if I would say, okay, if you really want to go get the master's, go do it at even a USF or whatever, Berkeley or wherever, right? Any sort of, even if it's a master's in finance, just 1 year program, that's fine. You obviously did really well there for 4.0 GPA, so like it worked out for you. But I'd love to hear just like how that extra 1 year, like did things suddenly change when you were getting the master's, or was it more of the same in terms of jobs and stuff like that? Talk to me a little bit about like, did you start networking a little bit? How was your knowledge on like job seeking at that point?
Gotcha. So on job seeking, my knowledge still was not good at all. I mean, I went in there, I guess it looked cooler because I had an ongoing master's on my resume. And because the actual knowledge in that program was very good. It's kind of tailored towards people who want to take the CFA. So
Oh,
it
cool.
was technically rigorous and it was, going a lot of steps further in terms of just if you read the CFA curriculum, that master's program covered everything level 1 and 2 in that program.
Nice.
So
Okay.
theoretically, their goal is that if you were to not even buy a prep course, but just go through that master's program, you should be able to sit for the 1 and 2 exam. That's kind of the goal for the
Oh,
program.
that's awesome. Okay. I
In
didn't
terms
realize.
of learning, that was great, but in terms of like
Career
seeking,
center.
yeah, in terms of seeking a job and getting a job, it was not good. Like I thought that, and I've said this to some of the mentors in the program. I thought, oh, I hop on a coffee chat every now and then. I was like, oh, I'm networking. But then once I got to WSO and they were like, oh, you should be having this many coffee chats, or you should be sending out this many emails, LinkedIn messages, etc. I was like, oh, I wasn't networking at all. That was
That was a
horrible.
one off here and there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So that was it was quite a wake up call when I saw what networking actually is. I was like, or if I could go back in time, I'd be like, Trent, you're not doing enough at all to, get your name out there.
And you know what? This is like so common. It's like, it's actually hard to do if you don't have like set goals or timelines. Because the reality is, even with the students inside our program, we're getting rejected more often than we're getting people on the call. Like, if you're out of 100 connection requests, if you're getting six, seven people on a call, you're doing amazing, right? You're doing an amazing job, right? So like we even guide towards like 3 to 5 phone calls a week, because we realize like you're not going to be getting on. Not every kid, especially from a non-target, is going to be able to get 10 calls a week. It's just not realistic. But so talk to me a little bit about like, so when you came to us, you had already graduated from your master's. You were, had you started kind of just more recruiting more aggressively, applying to more jobs? Talk to me a little bit about like the toughest time for you in terms of like, when did you realize you needed help, and were you just happened to stumble across us at a certain time, or was it more like you were searching for something?
Yeah, so I guess I'll start with the realization point. It definitely came closer to graduation because getting rejected in the fall when you just start your master's program, it's okay, whatever. I have a full year of school ahead of me to figure things out. But then you get closer and closer and closer to graduation. You're like, shoot, like, am I just going to be sitting here
Yeah.
doing nothing? So
Student debt was student debt.
yeah, yeah, I was like, oh man, I just knew I needed to do something more. I
Yeah.
was like, I can't just sit here and just, let the world pummel me. But yeah, through then I just started scrolling through LinkedIn and I started trying to just read kind of the ins and outs of the industry. I knew what positions were and obviously big firms, but just trying to get a sense of, what is my background tailored towards, what can I break into? What would, how do I could pitch something where my skills could transfer smoothly into a job. And then I just kept your profiles and the WSO just kept popping up all over my LinkedIn, and I enjoyed reading the threads. I enjoyed the posts you guys make. I follow you guys on Instagram, so I saw the interview questions and I would just try to answer them, and that was always fun. But then, yeah, once I saw like a advertisement or comment about the academy, I was like, let me just take a look and read through this, and then I read through it, and yeah, I was like, this is exactly what I need. Just because I felt like I had a pretty strong technical background. At this time I passed my CFA, or I took my CFA level one exam, got the results. I passed it shortly after, but that plus a grad school is like, I think I'm technically pretty sound. And then I thought that with an academy who could help me network, get my name out there, and also just boost my technical skills as well, because you guys have tons of good resources and courses. I was confident. I was like, this is it. This will land me something.
And so tell me kind of when you first joined us, what it, yeah, I assume you did the CV review right out of the gate, the LinkedIn profile,
Mhm.
all that stuff. Tell me what like you felt like in terms of like stage, were you following the accountability matrix and the assignments? Like, were you accelerating ahead because you had more time? Were you like going along in the same time frame? Tell me a little bit about like how you attacked the assignments that we threw at you, because it's a lot.
Yeah, yeah. So at first, I definitely accelerated ahead. I went ahead and did the resume review and attack. That was the first thing. And then also I met with some people, just the mentors, both in kind of their all research guys, sales and trading guys, and just, talked to them a bunch. So that was the first thing I did. And then did the WSO template resume and did the reviews. That was the first thing I tackled.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, well, that was my main focus. And then on the side, I was still doing like the Excel boot camps, some of the courses and just learning. So
And then
I got it.
did you work on your story a lot with any of the mentors, like in terms of like making sure your why or tell me about yourself, all that stuff was honed in for your story, or no, not so much?
Yes, yes, that really helped. I met with Sai. I
Yep.
forget the last name, but Sai. But
Yep. Parapelli.
before both my interviews, I met with him, and he just went into depth on the "tell me about yourself" story,
Mhm.
because I didn't realize how important that is. And once or after going over that with him, I just realized how bad my previous one was. I was like, I sound like a robot. It's like I might like before, in my other interviews or informational chats, whatever. Like looking back, I was like, I was just reading my resume bottom up, just like a
Yeah.
robot.
Well,
I
but
didn't
don't
know.
you know, it's funny because I feel like there's so many kids out there doing the motions
Hmm.
like this, where it's like that incremental coaching of like a one-on-one with somebody, like being like, no, that's generic. No, that's average. And then being told like, tell me something more, give me more details here. Tell me something more personal is like a critical piece to finding a job, because when you get into the interview and you're able to deliver something really authentic, the people just like you more.
Yeah,
It was like
yeah.
I was just having actually, it reminds me of office hours we just had, and one of our students was like, "I'm getting all these conversations, and I just feel like I'm not connecting with them." I'm like, her name's Alice. I'm like, Alice, you are incredible. You've done 120 calls. Like, the only reason you're not going to get the job is because you're not personable enough. I'm like, make you have like two IB internships already. Your sophomore year, like, make a self-deprecating joke near the beginning. Be like, I had no clue. Did it? She did that real recently. She came back. She's like, oh my gosh, like it was so much better. Like they connected with me. But like, you need to be told like where you sit, like in the hierarchy of like, are you competitive? Is this generic? Are you overly competitive? And they're going to assume you're just a robot, like you're no fun. And so you need to index in that direction. Like having somebody to tell you that straight is actually really helpful. I feel like, so, if you're an athlete, that has a somewhat lower GPA, you need to over index on the technicals and be incredibly strong in the technicals. If they are like, an engineer or a math major with a 4.0 somewhere, you probably need to over index a little bit more on the social side, right?
No,
Uh,
yeah, definitely. And it definitely helps to just, instead of just reading the resume bottom up, just
yeah.
tailor some sort of customized story to how you got here and, why you're trying to get it. It's selling a story more than just reading
Yeah.
off accomplishments, because like many people say, everybody has the summer internship. A lot of people have good grades.
Yeah.
A lot of people go to better schools than you, but just kind of how you could make yourself like you could tell, or I could tell when I was talking, pre and post WSO to people, just how engaged they were when I'm telling a story versus just reading off, some accomplishments that may or may not matter to them.
They'd
So
sit up in their seat, right? And they'd lean forward rather than rolling their eyes or like looking at their phone. Right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So you came in, I'm curious. So you did a lot of that branding work, which is good. And that, like, the tell me about yourself, all that stuff for the fit stuff. Did you just kick off your networking right after that? Like, because that's usually what we have to, like, once you have the stories down, the branding, or did you work on some more technicals before you felt comfortable, like, doing that?
I started kicking off my networking right away.
Yeah.
My mindset was I'll just send out a bunch of these messages, and then if and obviously keep refreshing my technicals, and then once I hear back or once I get the opportunity, like the technicals just better be in place just
Can
from
you, can you give
that.
the listeners just like an understanding of like how many, like what your conversions were from like connection requests to people? Because, you're not at like a Ivy League school here. You obviously didn't have unlimited alumni to hit up. Still pretty big school, so you had probably some, right? So I'm curious, like, how did that look just overall? Rough numbers. It doesn't have to be exact, just to give people a perspective.
Yeah, so I'd say the conversion ratio for calls was, I'd say for every 100 people I messaged, probably 8 to 10 calls, which actually isn't.
Pretty good.
I was surprised, like,
That's
or
really good, actually.
yeah,
That's higher
yeah.
than we
After
judged.
hearing about other people's stories, I didn't like. Now I know that's good. Before I was like, oh, this is horrible. But now, I realized that was good.
Mhm.
And I think one other thing that helped was just every call I would make, I would end it with, like, do you have anybody else I could talk to? So that I think that helped because I would get calls, but someone else would for like,
Yeah,
firm
every
X.
call is worth 1.3 calls, really, 1.4 calls, right?
Yeah, because it's like if I have firm X, but then someone from firm X recommends me to another person from that firm or a friend they have another firm, I'm probably going to get the call just because it's coming from someone they know. So I
Warm
think
it.
that helped just being, at the end of calls, hey, if there's anybody else who does this, like I'd love to talk to them and just pick their brains. And they, people are nice. They'd be like, yeah, sure. I have a friend over here. I'll go shoot him an email. And then next thing you know, 2 days later, you get an email like, hey, I got your number from blah, blah, blah. Like I'm free this time. So
It's
I
amazing.
think that definitely helped with being more accurate on the calls.
Okay, and then just tell me a little bit about like you scaled up your networking. What was like the recruiting like? Did you have a lot of interviews and you were striking out? Did you have just a few processes and you nailed it? And then, of course, tell the audience like where you ended up and what's the outcome.
Yeah. So throughout my networking, I would say first, I started getting a lot more traction when I just knew how to go about coffee chats, and I just felt more control on the coffee chats. It wasn't just I'm sitting there waiting for them to say something. I could actually,
Yeah,
not take over the coffee chat, but just direct it in a way that would be beneficial to both myself and the coffee chatter.
yeah.
And at first, I would get a lot of, oh, talk to my friend here. They might be looking for people, and it was kind of bouncing around, getting kind of like right there, but not quite there where I was getting interviews. And then I'd say, I think about 2, 3 months in, that's when I got 2 interviews, one from Standish Management and one from LSEG, like today. Both, or the LSEG one came from a coffee chat. I had a coffee chat with our team lead, and then he was pretty much just saying, yeah, if you have any roles open, like go ahead and apply. And then, my name ended up on his desk, and that's how I got in the interview room. But
Nice. And so tell me a little bit about how that interview went, if you're willing to share. Was it tough technically? Was it more just behavioral, like you want to be here, you have the right background, and so we're good? Or
so the first part was up here. I got an email from one of the recruiters, and it was just a spreadsheet. And pretty much what the job is you're involved in like the rebalancing and reconstruction of indices based on whatever the ground rules are.
yeah,
So they send you an Excel sheet, and it says, here are the index rules. Here's an Excel sheet, and just kind of make sure those rules are reflected in this Excel sheet. And then
like
there's
a
a bunch
test,
of
Excel test. How long did you have to turn it around?
they so in the description they said like send it back as soon as possible.
Oh my
So
gosh, super stressful.
yeah, yeah. So I got the email and I was like, okay, I got to get this done. I think it took 2 or 3 hours,
Yeah,
and yeah, pretty much. So that was like technical. It's pretty much there's a certain amount of constituents in an index. Things happen, market caps fluctuate. Now you just need to use a bunch of if statements and lookup functions to determine whether things should be added, booted,
did you
and
feel like you were prepared for that? Had you done the Excel modeling course with us or any of the boot camps?
yes, yes, definitely. I definitely
Okay,
felt very prepared, and
cool.
yeah, if you're well versed in Excel and you could sort through data quickly and just understand kind of the programming logic behind the functions, you should be able to do it. But
Yeah,
in a nutshell, that's what it was. I did it. I sent it back, and then I think 2 weeks, maybe a little bit more later, that's when they emailed and say, "Hey, we want to do an interview." And then from there on, it was mostly behavioral after I did the Excel assignment. So I
nice.
think in their mind, it was just saying, if you could do this technical Excel assessment, you're probably good technically to do the job. Now let's meet them. And then after that was behavioral mostly. I think the most technical thing I got was just explaining what I know about indices, why they're important, how they work. But
Nice, man.
yeah, that was the
That's
process
super
too.
exciting. Yeah, super exciting. So tell me a little bit about just like if you had to look back and talk to yourself, maybe in JUCO, talk to your younger self and just like what would you give advice to people who are maybe at a non-target or just maybe starting out really kind of they're not at like a top school, they don't have as many doors open to them. What would you say to them in terms of like getting ready? What do you think was like the most important steps for you?
So first things first, I would say be very technically sound just because I mean, at least I saw it as if I come from a non-target and you're super technically sound and they throw a bunch of technicals at you and you complete them, you're kind of just saying, I'm ready to do whatever. I know kind of
Yeah.
the technical skills behind things. And then in terms of, getting your name out there, just networking, networking, networking. And if you think, you're networking a lot, do two levels above that and just keep going because coming from non-target, you won't get a lot of calls back. It's not like anybody's going to read your school and be like, oh, wow, you went here, unless they went to the same school, but you're just going to have to network a ton. And then,
And just so people know, Trent's conversion from connection requests or email or whatever to calls of 8 to 10% is actually extremely high. That's like Ivy League level in terms of what we tend to see there. Like usually we're seeing in the 3 to 6% range. In terms of
Mhm.
like what you'd expect from say 100 connection requests on LinkedIn, even with the follow-ups, you're going to be getting the majority of people are going to ignore you. And so it does take those follow-ups just to even get on those 5 to 10 calls. And so I think it's important for everyone listening, like not to get discouraged and realize part of that being ignored, part of that rejection is just a numbers game, right? And so to tilt the odds in your favor, right, you need to have volume.
Yeah, I would also say too, when you're in the calls, I think the number one thing that helped was showing genuine curiosity.
Yes.
It's because it's kind of you could go on a call and try and brag about how you won a competition or whatever, and a lot of that stuff's cool. Like I know a lot of people in this program probably have cool past internships they could talk about for days, and it's impressive. But the number one thing I saw people willing to help me is when I just showed how curious I was, just asking, good questions and staying up to date on what's going on in whatever, particular sector or just industry you want to work in and asking questions about that. And I think when people see that you're curious, they'll try and do something for you, even if you don't have a super prestigious background. Like they like to see
That's true.
curiosity and they like to see that you actually want to do what you're calling to do. And it's more than just like, oh, I need a job and
And I'm going to do this networking because I was told to do this networking instead of like, yeah, are you authentic? Do you actually want to do this?
Mhm.
Right. And so
Yeah.
it's so true. Oh my gosh, the authenticity, like if you're asking, like if you're leaning forward in your chair, the body language, and you're like asking really specific questions about what they just said and follow-up questions on it, you're
Hmm.
clearly listening, you're engaged. Like there's so many positives, and they're like, wow, this kid is actually listening to what I'm saying, and he's he's actually asking really smart follow-up questions. So having that like base framework of that, like that technical knowledge, I think the CFA probably helped you, that master's helped you in that sense. Being able
Hmm.
to ask those more specific questions that show that knowledge actually probably did make a difference for you, right? So we don't want to discount the master's right after the undergrad. It did help in some way, but yeah, I think this is great, man. I think super congrats, great story. Coming from where you came from, and I'm excited to see kind of where you go from here.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I just want to say thank you, and I love what this program is doing. I think it's perfect for anyone who wants to break into finance. And like I mentioned, you have networking help, technical skills help, Excel help. Whether you want to prepare for one of those brain teaser aptitude tests, there's that too.
Yeah.
And then I guess the cherry on top is you can add extra stuff to your resume. You get the equity research internship, or there's another finance research internship. So even if you're lacking experience, that this program
Yeah, there's
helps
no
you.
excuses anymore for people.
Yeah, yeah, like you get to add experience,
Yeah.
knowledge, networking help. I don't
Yeah.
I don't see why anyone would not want to do it, but yeah, it was super good help, and I thought it was fun.
Awesome, Trent. Well, I appreciate the kind words, and yeah, definitely stay in touch, and we're here for your next step too if you wanna lean on us at any time. So just let me know.
No, yeah, thank you. I'm sure we'll stay in touch, and yeah, I hope you have a great rest of the day.
Too, man. Thanks.